So, Jerry Gidel is here to comment about the August USDA supply and demand report and also about this week's in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. So, Jerry, how are you today? We just finished another week, and how do you see that market reaction?
Well, the market reaction this week is, as we kind of expected, was just kind of waffle back and forth till we got the report. Uh, to some extent, I can't say that the USDA's Eastern Corn Belt yields reflected what Jack and I saw on our tour last week, but the nationwide issues there with the tremendous pressure on the northern plains yields and other states out that direction. We came up with 174.6 bushel yield. Actually, this 250 million number difference between the trade and the USDA is the first time in 6 years that we've been even lower by the USDA, and it's also the widest differential since 1997. Now, some of those were a few years that were, within 5 or 10 of this number. So back in the 200s, assuming the early 2000s. But interesting situation here that I think it's not surprising in the reality that a lot of investors and in that kind of looked at the Eastern Corn Belt and can't seem to see what happens on the west of the Mississippi. But I'm a biased person since I'm grew up west of the Mississippi, so that's my issue on the situation. Soybeans, let's pop in and give that number too. It came in at 50 bushels. That was only 4/10 of a bushel less than the trade, and 8/10 of a bushel from the trend line yield. From there, in August is really going to be the important month on that. So we're still going to be watching weather here going forward.
Yes, and you just told me that you had some very important rains in Illinois.
Yes, this week we've had a couple big heavy duty rains that have come through here late in the season. And that actually there was one that at the tail end of last week where they had a 3 to 5 inch type of thing south of I-70. But the real noted one for this week only happened yesterday of all things, was in a town called Gibson City, which is on the I-57 corridor that goes from Chicago to Champaign. It's north of the Champaign, and it's in Ford County, and it's we've been through that town. Shoot, I'd have to say 10 times in the last 15 years. So it was quite surprising to have 5 to 7 inches in a few hours, and they were having kayaks drive going through there. That's going to have a damage to some of the beans down there.
Yes, and do you see the dry weather worsening in the Dakotas right now?
Well, right now it's an interesting situation. I don't think that we've had really good weather up there over the last week and maybe into most of next week. There's some longer term forecasts here that there's going to be a chance for some more moisture up that way, which would be somewhat beneficial. Right now, the forecasts for the latter part of August and early September here are trying to throw in some numbers or throw in some more moisture potential along with the heat. So it's a combination of the moisture is really going to be the key feature, though. That's the one that really made the big difference last year. We really didn't have a tremendous amount of heat late August and September, maybe warmer than normal in September, but it wasn't no 190s and hundreds, that kind of stuff. But minimum moisture, and that was really a sneaky situation that impacted a lot of yields around the U.S. there. all the way from Nebraska to Ohio.
Well, and there are a lot of issues impacting wheat with those weather events in the northern part of the United States, the western parts in Canada, and now in France.
Exactly, the French situation. They're talking about the actually the to some extent excessive moisture that's lessened their quality, and they're talking about significant impact there on their milling wheat capabilities, and that so that's a factor in there. And actually, the USDA made quite some adjustments in the world numbers here yesterday. They took uh, excuse me, the Russian crop all the way down to 72, and I think 72 and a half, 12.5 million metric tons down in one fell swoop. That really is the impact of their spring wheat crop out there that really has been hurt, and that's probably, in my opinion, the biggest jump I've seen in quite some time in the Russian crop on a monthly basis. The other big factor, of course, was the number for Canada. That was adjusted down from 31.5 million metric tons down to 24. That's a 7 million total. You put those two together, you say, wow, that's approaching 20 million. The USDA had some increases in different places around the country, around the world, India a little bit, also the Australian crop, and that. So the monthly production was only reduced about I think 15 million, and they adjusted the stocks number down around 12 to 13 million in that. But I think the key thing to the wheat situation here is its potential impact on the price of wheat relative to corn. I think that this is really going to solidify wheat being back as a food grain, not a feed grain like it was last spring. And we had quite a few people looked at that, including the Chinese, as an alternative to buying corn. That's really taken that away. And of course, then we have our issues in South America here. USDA did end up ratcheting down its production number down 87 million metric tons, and that from their previous 93. From there, that's kind of still on the high side of the ranges of people's expectations in South America. But I guess the real twist of this thing is part of the other features that come along with the USDA's reports on production is demand side of things. And that was a little bit of a head scratcher here. Of course, we had some lackluster demand for old crop, and I've been kind of bouncing that around a little bit here. And the USDA took 75 million off their old crop number, but they also went ahead and took 100 million off a new crop. And considering what we just talked about, wheat values getting away from us, corn supplies in Brazil not being as strong, that suggests the fact that there's going to be more demand for the U.S. And so they took, instead of going up 100 million, they went down 100 million to 2.4 billion bushels for the new crop to 21-22 crop year. And now, to some extent, I think it was forced upon them a little bit with the USDA's production number, and that the reduced output there. They, I think, in their own subtle way, did not want to take their carryover stock down towards the 1.12 billion number they had for old crop, and so they left it around 1.25 from there, because if they left that exports there, that would have easily brought it down very close to this current year situation. Now, there's still some seasons to go, and maybe things can perk up in the various areas, but I'm not sure you can find a heck of a lot of better yield estimates in the Eastern Corn Belt. There's 3 states, Oklahoma, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, all registered record yields by at least 3 to 5 bushels in their state numbers here on the USDA. So those numbers probably aren't going to go higher. Well, the big question is, will things improve in the Western Corn Belt?
And does that make you change your own estimates?
We had a 207 yield from the USDA or from our own survey, and we projected a 202. It's possible we might think that that's closer to 208 to 210 type situation. I do not think that the 214 million is a strong possibility. From there, at the same time, there's some states out there like South Dakota, maybe even northern Iowa and parts of Minnesota that could easily lose some yield. So I'm comfortable with the 175 kind of number the USDA is at. We'll just have to see how things develop here over the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Yes, and next week we are going to have the Pro Farmer Tour, which always brings some news and some definitions for the crop.
It definitely will, and I think the one thing that's really come into the end of the fore here on this thing is that with the USDA's really postponing their field inputs and that from their enumerators out there in the Midwestern states until September. This is probably the first and probably the best overall look at the Midwest from Ohio through Indiana, Illinois, and eastern Iowa to Minnesota, while another group goes from South Dakota across Nebraska, western Iowa, and southern Minnesota. And so we're going to get a feel for what they see along the way from there. And it's going to be kind of a battle back and forth here. The Eastern Corn Belt's going to report pretty solid yields. There's no doubt about that. Or maybe even some record yields in some cases. At the same time, I'm very skeptical of having the great yields coming from all the locations there in the western part of this tour. So, and corn is really the one that is the best one to make a measure. We've kind of mentioned that before because there's something to count and you can kind of get a sense of what yields can be. Soybeans are going to be another one. But we were out there just pretty early on the soybean side of things here in Illinois. Definitely the crop had some unevenness and things like that. And what we saw, there were 60 or 65% of the crop looked fabulous, but there was other parts of it, that had a combination of either drowned out or had unevenness from the point of view that the water earlier in the season here had reduced its height or maybe impacted its pod count. And that's going to be the interesting thing as to what kind of pod counts we get on the tour this time around. On that, it gives a direction to look for. It doesn't really nail down things. Last year, some of the pod counts that were there disappeared by the time we actually got them in the bin because the dryness actually prompted some of the plants to abort those pods because they didn't feel like they could finish the process of filling them out. So they just that happens. That's the soybean, and just like corn, kind of self satisfies its needs, and so it sometimes sheds things just to make sure it can continue to harvest.
So I think, long story short, less supply in the world.
Exactly, less supply, and I think that's the twist of it is that we've got a window here of enthusiasm and unknown and things like that till we get into October. The one thing that we can all bet on is the fact that South America is going to try to end up getting a bigger crop this coming year. There's talk of pretty substantial increases in soybeans in Argentina. The Argentinians though are thinking about more corn because they don't like to pay the taxes. So the situation in Argentina might switch a little bit there, but and then the key thing is that it's popped up from our National Weather Service saying that La Nina seems to be building towards this fall period. That didn't help the South Americans last year in getting their soybean crop planted as timely as they like to. That's the one thing that's kind of back of my mind. I hope that it doesn't happen again to have the huge delay in getting those soybeans planted in Mato Grosso and those areas of Brazil. Last year, so many of the plants, planting didn't really get done for fully a month to maybe 6 weeks later than they normal like to do, and that's really put the pressure on everything in Brazil, from the combination of harvest for beans to when it had a major impact on second crop corn down there.
All right, that was it for now. Thank you, Jerry.
You bet. Always good to be with you, Lewis. And at this point, we will get some more information from our friends in the U.S. here that doing their tour across the Midwest.